My name is Alicia Williams, and at 67, I never thought I would hear my only son David call me a burden. After Jack, my husband of 43 years, passed away, I moved in with David temporarily. What my son forgot was that the beautiful two-story colonial he shares with his new wife Amanda still has my name on the deed. I kept that detail quiet as a gift to him. That silence ended the night he chose his wife over his mother. If you enjoy family justice stories, please like and subscribe before we continue. Drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from today, and get comfortable as I share how I reminded my son who really owned the roof over his head. Jack and I had what most would call a traditional American life. We married young in 1978, right after college. Jack worked as an electrical engineer while I taught third grade at Pinewood Elementary in Portland, Oregon. We saved every penny we could to give our only son David the opportunities we never had growing up in working-class families. Our modest ranch-style home in southeast Portland was nothing fancy, but we paid off the mortgage early by skipping vacations and driving the same cars for 15 years. Family always came first for us. When David showed academic promise, we took second jobs to pay for math camp science programs and college application prep. Jack would tutor neighborhood kids in the evenings, and I would grade papers until midnight most weekdays. "We're investing in his future," Jack would say whenever I worried about our retirement savings. "David will make something of himself, and that's worth more than any 401k. And David did make us proud. He graduated with honors from Oregon State with a computer science degree in 2006. His first job at a tech startup paid more than Jack and I made combined. We celebrated every promotion, every bonus, every step up the corporate ladder. Our boy was achieving the American dream. When the housing market crashed, in 2008, David actually benefited. He had been saving for a down payment, and suddenly prices were within his reach. That was when he found the colonial-style house in Lake Oswego, a prestigious suburb that would normally have been far beyond a young professional's budget. "Mom, Dad, it's perfect, but still $20,000 beyond what I can finance," he told us over Sunday dinner. "The sellers need to close quickly. If I wait to save more, this opportunity will be gone." Jack and I exchanged glances across the table. We had been saving for a kitchen remodel, but without a word we knew what we would do instead. "We can help with the down payment," Jack offered. "Consider it an early inheritance." What David didn't know was that we contributed far more than just helping with the down payment. To secure the favorable interest rate, the loan officer suggested putting my name on the deed as well, since my credit score was slightly better than David's. We never told him this detail, allowing him to believe the house was entirely his achievement. "Let him feel independent," Jack insisted. "The house is his gift. The paperwork is just formality." For 13 years, David lived in that house building equity and memories. He invited us over for holidays, backyard barbecues, and Sunday football. The legal arrangement faded into the background, just a signature on a document filed away in our home office. Then Jack got sick. Pancreatic cancer moves quickly and mercilessly. From diagnosis to hospice took just 11 months. Our savings disappeared into medical bills, specialty treatments, and finally funeral expenses. The medical insurance covered much, but not everything. Not the experimental treatments we desperately tried in Seattle. Not the round-the-clock home care in the final weeks. Jack passed away 8 months ago, leaving me with a half-empty house full of memories and a stack of medical bills I couldn't pay on my teacher's pension. The decision to sell our family home was painful but necessary. The housing market had changed drastically since we bought it in 1982. Developers were eager to tear down the modest homes in our neighborhood to build modern monstrosities. The offer I received was generous enough to clear the remaining medical bills, with some left over for a small apartment. But finding that apartment proved more challenging than expected. Portland's rental market had exploded in recent years, with even modest one-bedroom units commanding rents that would eat up most of my monthly income. Every application seemed to end with disappointment or waiting lists months long. "Stay with us while you look," David offered after a particularly discouraging day of apartment hunting. "The guest room is just sitting empty." At first, I declined. David had married Amanda just 14 months earlier, and newlyweds need their space. But as the closing date on my house approached and no apartment materialized, I reluctantly accepted his invitation. "It will just be for a month or two," I assured him, "just until I find something within my budget." David and Amanda welcomed me with apparent warmth when I arrived with my 2 suitcases and a few boxes of personal items. The rest of my belongings went into a storage unit, another monthly expense I hadn't anticipated. "Mi casa es su casa," David said, showing me to the guest room with its attached bathroom. "We're happy to help, right, Amanda?" Amanda smiled and nodded, but something in her eyes didn't match her expression. "Of course. Family helps family." I should have recognized the warning signs from that first weekend. The way Amanda tensed when I offered to cook Sunday dinner, the slight repositioning of my toiletries in the bathroom, the comments about adjusting to having someone new in our space. But grief clouds, judgment, and gratitude can blind us to reality. I was simply thankful to have a roof over my head and my son nearby as I navigated life without Jack for the first time in over 4 decades. I missed my partner terribly. The emptiness of evenings without his gentle snoring beside me. The silence at breakfast where his cheerful humming should have been. The absence of his steadying hand on my shoulder when tears came without warning. I believed that this arrangement would be temporary, a brief stop on my journey to a new chapter of independence. I could not have imagined how quickly things would change, or how painfully I would be reminded of whose name remained on that deed. The first month living with David and Amanda was filled with small frictions that I tried to dismiss as normal adjustment pains. Amanda had particular ways she liked the household to run, which I understood completely. Every woman establishes her domain according to her own preferences. I had done the same in my home with Jack. What began as minor irritations soon developed into patterns I couldn't ignore. I would organize the spice rack alphabetically, while cooking only to find everything rearranged the next day into Amanda's preferred grouping system. My offer to prepare dinner 3 nights a week was accepted, then undermined when I'd discover they had already eaten by the time I started cooking. "Oh, we got hungry early," Amanda would say with a shrug. "There's leftover pizza in the fridge if you want some." The references to ownership became more pointed as weeks passed. What started as our home in conversations quickly became my house from Amanda's lips. When I placed family photos on the fireplace mantel, they mysteriously migrated to my bedroom within days. "The living room has a certain aesthetic," Amanda explained when I mentioned the missing photos. "We're thinking of having it featured in a home design blog." No such feature ever materialized. My son's behavior shifted gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. David had always called me daily during Jack's illness and in the months following his death. Now living under the same roof, I paradoxically saw less of him. He left for work earlier, came home later, and spent weekends on house projects with Amanda or at activities with their friends. When we did speak, he echoed Amanda's subtle complaints. "Mom, Amanda mentioned you left the kitchen windows open overnight. We're trying to keep the air conditioning efficient." Or, "Mom, Could you remember to put your shoes in the closet instead of by the door Amanda nearly tripped this morning? Each comment seemed reasonable in isolation. Together, they formed a pattern that made me increasingly uncomfortable in what was supposed to be my temporary home. I tried to accommodate their preferences, becoming almost invisible in the process. I spent more time in my bedroom, coming out mainly when they were at work or away. I offered to contribute to household expenses, though my limited pension made this a symbolic gesture more than meaningful financial support. "That's not necessary," David said when I first offered a check. "But if you want to cover your own groceries, that would be helpful." I started preparing my own meals separately and eating at different times to avoid imposing on their routine. My search for affordable housing intensified, but the market remained challenging. Apartments within my budget were located in areas far from my friends, church, and the community I'd built over decades. The waiting lists for senior housing stretched 6 months to a year. "Have you looked at Meadowlark Estates?" Amanda suggested one evening. "I heard they have openings." Meadowlark was 40 miles away in Washington state, across the Columbia River, and far from everything familiar. Her suggestion felt less like helpful advice and more like a not-so-subtle hint. 4 weeks into my stay, I discovered the community center in Lake Oswego offered programs for seniors. I began spending mornings there, taking water aerobics classes and meeting new friends who understood the challenges of aging and loss. Barbara Jenkins, a fellow widow, became particularly dear to me. Her warmth and candor provided the emotional support I wasn't finding at David's house. "You should see how my daughter-in-law rearranges my kitchen when they visit for just a weekend," Barbara commiserated over coffee. "Territory marking, I call it. Like cats, but with kitchen utensils instead of urine." Her humor helped me maintain perspective, but the situation at David's continued to deteriorate. 2 months into my stay, a promising apartment opportunity arose. A small one-bedroom unit in a senior complex, just 10 minutes from David's neighborhood, had an unexpected vacancy. I submitted my application immediately past the credit check and was told the apartment would be available the following month after renovations. I shared the good news with David and Amanda over dinner. "That's wonderful, Mom," David said, genuine relief in his voice. "The timing works out perfectly." Amanda's smile seemed more authentic than usual. "We should help you plan the move. I know some great furniture stores for small spaces." For 2 weeks, I allowed myself to hope and plan. I visited the complex twice more, took measurements, and even selected paint colors from the options they offered. 3 days before I was scheduled to sign the lease, the property manager called with devastating news. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Williams. There's been a mistake with the unit. The previous tenant has decided not to move after all. We can place you on our waiting list, but realistically, it could be 6 to 8 months. That evening, I shared the setback, with David fighting back tears of disappointment. "These things happen," he said, with a sigh that sounded more like frustration than sympathy. "You'll find something else." Amanda remained silent, studying her plate. When David left the room to answer a phone call, she finally spoke. "Maybe this is a sign you should expand your search area. Portland has gotten so expensive. Have you considered Vancouver or even Gresham? Both locations would put at least an hour between us, assuming no traffic." The message was becoming clearer with each passing day. Thanksgiving arrived with a chill in both the air and the household. I had always hosted the holiday throughout David's life, my kitchen filled with traditional recipes passed down through generations. When I offered to prepare some of our family favorites for the meal, Amanda quickly shut down the idea. "I've already planned everything," she said, showing me a spreadsheet with cooking times and responsibilities assigned. None included me. Maybe you could pick up some extra dinner rolls on your way back from your morning walk. The dinner itself was beautiful but lacked the warmth of family tradition. No cornbread stuffing with sausage and pecans that Jack had loved. No sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping that had been David's favorite since childhood. Instead, everything followed recipes from a trendy food magazine Amanda subscribed to. Remember how Dad would always carve the turkey wearing that ridiculous chef's hat I mentioned, trying to bring Jack's memory to the table? David smiled briefly. Yeah, that was fun when I was a kid. We're creating our own traditions now, Amanda interjected. David and I were thinking next year we might do Thanksgiving at a resort in Arizona. No cooking, no cleanup. The message was clear: next year there would be no place for me at their table. The following week brought another painful incident when Amanda invited several of her friends over for a dinner party. I offered to make myself scarce, planning to visit Barbara that evening, but Amanda surprised me. No need to disappear, Alicia. You should join us. These are good people to know in the community. The invitation seemed genuine, so I changed my plans and prepared to socialize for the first time since moving in. I wore a nice blouse, applied makeup, and even styled my hair in an effort to make a good impression. Amanda's friends were mostly couples in their 30s like her and David. The conversation flowed easily until one woman, Jennifer, asked how I was adjusting to multi-generational living. It must be so nice having your mother here to help with household things, Jennifer said to Amanda. My mom lives in Florida, and we never get free babysitting. Amanda laughed. We don't have children yet, so Alicia doesn't have grandmother duties. We're just helping her out temporarily while she looks for her own place. The way she emphasized temporarily made my cheeks burn. Later that evening, I excused myself to use the bathroom and overheard Amanda in the kitchen with two of her friends. It was supposed to be for a month maximum, she was saying in a hushed voice. Now it's been almost 3 months, and there's always some excuse about why she can't find a place. That would drive me crazy, one friend responded. My mother-in-law stays for a weekend, and I need a vacation afterward. David feels obligated because his dad died. But honestly, she's disrupting our entire life. I can't even walk around in my underwear in my own house anymore. I slipped back to my room without using the bathroom, the conversation replaying in my mind. What hurt most wasn't Amanda's frustration, which I could understand, but David's absence from my defense. Where was the son who had once told me I was his hero for how I cared for Jack during his illness? The next morning I approached David while Amanda was at her Saturday yoga class. David, I need to talk to you about something that's bothering me. I began carefully. He glanced at his watch. Can we make it quick, Mom? I'm supposed to meet Amanda for brunch after her class. I explained what I'd overheard and how it made me feel. I know this situation isn't ideal for anyone, but I'm trying my best to find a place. I feel like Amanda sees me as an intruder rather than family. David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. Mom Amanda is still adjusting to sharing her home. This is her first time being married and having her own house. She'll get better with time. Her home. The words slipped out before I could stop them. David, this is your house too. He stood up abruptly. You know what I mean. Look, I need to go. Amanda gets upset if I'm late. We'll figure this out okay. The conversation ended with nothing resolved, and that evening, Amanda introduced new house rules under the guise of making everyone more comfortable. These included specific hours for kitchen use, a schedule for the laundry room, and a request that I text before inviting any visitors over. We just want to make sure we're not planning to use the same spaces at the same time, she explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Boundaries make for happy households. David nodded along, avoiding my gaze. That same week, I received another rejection from an apartment complex, this one citing my income-to-rent ratio as insufficient. The property manager suggested I find a cosigner or look for less expensive options further from the city center. The realization that my housing search would take much longer than expected settled over me like a heavy blanket. My son's home no longer felt like a safe harbor, but a place where I was merely tolerated my presence, a countdown clock of imposed patience. December arrived with twinkling lights throughout the neighborhood, but little warmth in our household. The Christmas season had always been special for our family, with traditions Jack and I had cultivated throughout David's childhood. I had carefully stored a few precious ornaments when selling the house, hoping to incorporate them into David and Amanda's holiday decorations. I found the box with your baby's first Christmas ornament, I told David one evening as Amanda began unpacking their decorations, and the glass icicles your grandmother brought from Germany. "That's nice, Mom," he replied, without looking up from his phone. "But Amanda already has a color scheme planned for the tree, navy and silver this year." Amanda nodded. "It's going to coordinate with our living room decor, very magazine-worthy." The vintage red and green ornaments remained in their box, along with the handmade decorations David had created in elementary school. I placed them in my closet next to the photo albums that had also been deemed unsuitable for public display. When the tree was finished, it looked like it belonged in a department store display window, beautiful, coordinated, and utterly devoid of family history or personality. That night I cried silently in my room, missing Jack desperately. He would have known how to navigate this situation with grace and humor. As Christmas approached, the financial discussions began. One evening after dinner, Amanda cleared her throat and placed a spreadsheet on the table. "Alicia, David and I have been looking at our household expenses since you moved in." She began, her voice professionally pleasant. "We've seen increases in the utility bills and groceries, which is completely understandable." David looked uncomfortable but added, "We thought it might be fair if you contributed to these costs while you're staying with us." I had already been buying my own groceries and had offered money previously, but now they presented specific figures. The amount they suggested was nearly a third of my monthly pension. "I can contribute what I can," I said carefully, "but this would make saving for my security deposit much more difficult." Amanda's smile tightened. "We understand it's challenging, but everyone needs to cover their costs. David and I have our future to think about, too." I agreed to give them what I could afford, which was less than their requested amount. The dissatisfaction was evident on Amanda's face, but she accepted the check with a curt thank you. In January, a minor health incident brought the tensions to a new level. While getting out of the shower, I slipped on the tile floor and fell, bruising my hip badly. The noise brought David running, and he helped me back to my bedroom. "Maybe we should take you to urgent care," he suggested, genuine concern in his voice. Before I could answer, Amanda appeared in the doorway. "Is everything okay? I was on a work call." "Mom fell in the bathroom. I think we should have her checked out." Amanda's expression flickered between concern and annoyance. "Of course, if it's necessary. But I have that important presentation this afternoon. Can you handle it?" For a moment, David seemed torn between responsibilities. "I have meetings too, but I can reschedule." "Don't worry about it," I insisted, embarrassed by the disruption I was causing. "It's just a bruise. I've had worse." After some discussion, David helped me to bed with ice packs and pain relievers, rescheduling his morning meetings to check on me periodically. Amanda left for her office, her parting words, a reminder about a dinner they had planned with friends that evening. "We can cancel if absolutely necessary," she said, emphasizing the last word. "Go to your dinner," I insisted. "I'll be fine with some rest." That night, I heard them arguing after returning from their event. "Your mother needs more care than we can provide," Amanda was saying. "What if she had broken her hip? What if it happens when we're not home?" "What do you suggest?" David's voice was defensive. "Put her in a nursing home." "I'm just saying we need to accelerate finding her a place with appropriate support." "This isn't sustainable, David." The fall and their reaction to it highlighted my vulnerability. I was aging, living in someone else's home, increasingly unwelcome, with limited financial options. Jack had always handled our long-term planning, and his death had left me adrift in ways I hadn't fully comprehended until now. In February, I attempted to bridge the growing divide by finding common ground with Amanda. Noticing her interest in gardening magazines, I mentioned my experience with the Portland Garden Club. "I'd be happy to help with spring planting," I offered. "I specialized in native plants and rain gardens." To my surprise, Amanda seemed genuinely interested. For a few weekends, we actually worked together planning the backyard landscaping, and I began to hope for a thaw in our relationship. "You really know your plants," she commented one Saturday as we sketched a garden layout. "This design could win awards." For a brief period, I felt useful and appreciated. David noticed the improved atmosphere, commenting on how nice it was to see his two favorite women getting along. The harmony was short-lived. When the plants arrived and the actual work began, Amanda suddenly had other priorities. She invited her friends over to help, instead implementing a completely different design than what we had planned together. "We decided to go with something more contemporary," she explained when I asked about the change. "The landscaper suggested this would add more property value." I retreated again, recognizing the pattern of momentary inclusion followed by deliberate exclusion. The message remained consistent. This was their house, their life, and I was merely passing through. Most disturbing was finding my belongings moved or reorganized without my permission. My reading glasses would disappear from the side table where I left them. The mug Jack had given me no longer had a place in the kitchen cabinet. The small desk I used in my bedroom was rearranged while I was out to improve the energy flow, according to Amanda. Each change eroded my sense of security and belonging. I found myself becoming anxious about leaving my room, worried about what might be different upon my return. I started keeping my most precious items in my purse, carrying Jack's watch and our wedding photo with me, even to the community center. The emotional toll was significant. I developed insomnia, often lying awake until the early hours, replaying conversations and wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I spoiled David as a child? Had I failed to prepare him for adult responsibilities? Would Jack be disappointed in how our son was treating me now? My nightly phone calls with Barbara became a lifeline. Unlike family members who might take sides or judge, Barbara offered unconditional support and practical advice from someone who understood the complexities of aging and family dynamics. "You need to start documenting everything," she advised. "Keep a journal of incidents and conversations. Note dates and exact words as best you can remember." "I'm not building a court case against my own son," I protested. "No, but you're preserving your sanity and your dignity," she replied. "And someday, you might need to remind David of exactly what happened during this time." I began keeping a small notebook, recording the daily slights and occasional kindnesses. I also started writing letters to Jack, that I never sent pouring out my confusion and hurt to the one person who had always been my steady rock. The writing was therapeutic, helping me process emotions I couldn't express aloud in the increasingly cold atmosphere of David and Amanda's home. March 15th marked 1 year since Jack's passing. I woke that morning with a heaviness in my chest, memories flooding back of hospital rooms, hospice nurses, and the final peaceful moment when my husband of 43 years took his last breath while holding my hand. I dressed carefully in the blue blouse Jack had always loved and placed a small vase of daffodils, his favorite spring flower, on my nightstand. Before leaving for the community center, I left a note for David. Today marks 1 year since your father passed. I thought we might have dinner together this evening to remember him. Love, Mom. When I returned that afternoon, the note was gone, but no response awaited. I prepared a simple meal of Jack's favorite pot roast with potatoes and carrots, setting the table for 3. As 6 o'clock approached, I texted David, "Dinner is ready, whenever you and Amanda can make it home." His reply came 20 minutes later. "Sorry, Mom, forgot to tell you we have tickets to a work event tonight. Don't wait up." He had forgotten. The anniversary had slipped his mind entirely. I sat alone at the table, the food growing cold, tears sliding down my cheeks. When Amanda and David arrived home around 10, I was in my room with the door closed, pretending to be asleep. The following morning, Amanda found me in the kitchen making coffee. "That smells amazing," she said, reaching for a mug. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," I admitted. Yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of Jack's death. She paused momentarily, then continued preparing her coffee. "Oh, that's right. These milestones are tough. Anyway, did David mention, we're having the Petersons over this weekend. They have that gorgeous craftsman in Selwood and are thinking of renovating." The dismissal of my grief was so casual, so complete, that it momentarily stunned me into silence. Later that day, when I mentioned the anniversary to David, his face fell. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. Work has been insane, and there's this big project, and—" "It's okay," I interrupted, though it wasn't. We all process grief differently. That evening, I overheard the conversation that would change everything. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but as I approached the kitchen for a glass of water, Amanda's emphatic tone made me pause in the hallway. "This has gone on long enough, David. It's been over 4 months now. Your mother needs to be gone by the end of next month." "That's not much time," David protested weakly. "She's still looking for a place. Then she needs to look harder or expand her search area. I can't live like this anymore. It's affecting our marriage, my work, everything. She's your mother, but I'm your wife." A long silence followed before David sighed heavily. "I'll talk to her this weekend. See if we can set a firm move-out date." "End of April," Amanda insisted. "Non-negotiable. If she needs financial help, fine, we can provide that, but she needs to be out of this house." I backed away silently, my heart pounding. The ultimatum had been issued, and David had essentially agreed. 4 decades of loving and supporting my son, and this was where we had ended up. A burden to be managed, an obligation with an expiration date. I spent a sleepless night considering my options. The housing search had yielded nothing affordable in Portland. My savings were dwindling. Friends had spare rooms, but nothing long-term. The reality of my situation was stark without David's help. I faced the possibility of moving far from my community or stretching my finances beyond what was sustainable. The following evening, David, Amanda, and I sat down to a tense dinner. The conversation was stilted, with Amanda making pointed comments about temporary arrangements and adult children supporting aging parents appropriately. I could see David's frustration building with each passive-aggressive remark. Finally, when I innocently asked if he'd heard back from a property manager I'd applied with, he slammed his fork down. "Mom, we need to talk about realistic options here. You can't just keep waiting for the perfect apartment to magically appear in our neighborhood." "I'm not expecting magic, David. I'm trying to find something I can afford near my friends and community." "Well, maybe your expectations are too high for your budget," he snapped. "Amanda and I can't keep putting our lives on hold while you reject perfectly good options because they're not ideal." "Putting your lives on hold," I repeated quietly. "I've tried to be as unobtrusive as possible." "But you're still here," Amanda interjected. "Every day. When we get home, when we wake up, when we want privacy." David nodded, his expression hardening. "Amanda's right. We didn't sign up for this long-term arrangement. You're just extra weight we're carrying right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. Extra weight, a burden, exactly what I had feared becoming to my only child. Amanda nodded in agreement, a satisfied expression crossing her face briefly before she composed her features into a mask of concern. "We want what's best for everyone, Alicia. Surely there are senior communities that would provide the support you need at this stage of life." Something inside me shifted in that moment. Years of putting my son first, of making sacrifices for his happiness, and success of swallowing hurt to maintain peace, all fell away. I looked at the strangers across the table from me and made a decision. I smiled calmly and stood up. "Excuse me for a moment. I need to get something from my room." When I returned, I carried a folder containing documents I had brought with me when selling my home. I placed it on the table and opened it deliberately. "David, do you remember when you bought this house 13 years ago?" He frowned, confused by the change in topic. "Of course. What does that have to do with anything?" "Do you remember who helped with the down payment?" "You and Dad contributed. I've always been grateful for that." I nodded and removed the property deed from the folder, sliding it across the table. "Did you ever actually look at the deed? Really? Look at who owns this house you live in?" David picked up the document, his expression changing from confusion to shock as he read. "This says, 'You're the primary owner.' That can't be right." "It is right," I said quietly. "Your father and I put the house primarily in my name to secure the lower interest rate with my credit score. We never told you because we wanted you to feel it was your achievement. The mortgage has been paid from your account all these years, but legally this house is still 60% mine." Amanda snatched the document from David's hands, her face paling as she read. "This can't be legally binding after all this time. There must be a statute of limitations or something." "The deed is filed with the county recorder's office," I explained. "You're welcome to consult a lawyer, but the situation is quite clear. The house you're so eager to remove me from, it's in my name." The silence that followed was deafening. The morning after my revelation brought an awkward breakfast encounter. I entered the kitchen to find David sitting alone at the table, staring into his coffee mug. "Good morning," I said, maintaining the calm demeanor I had discovered the night before. "Mom," he began, then stopped, struggling for words. "About last night, I didn't mean what I said about you being extra weight. I was frustrated and spoke without thinking." I poured myself coffee and sat across from him. "Words spoken in anger often reveal hidden truths, David. Your father taught me that. This situation with the house," he continued, avoiding my comment, "it must be some misunderstanding. I've been paying the mortgage for 13 years. "Yes, you have," I acknowledged, "and that will certainly factor into any legal discussion about ownership percentages. But the deed stands as written." Amanda entered dressed for work, but with dark circles under her eyes, suggesting a sleepless night. Her demeanor had transformed overnight from imperious hostess to nervous tenant. "Good morning, Alicia," she said with forced brightness. "Can I make you some breakfast? Avocado toast and omelet." "No, thank you, Amanda. I've been managing my own breakfast for 67 years. I think I can handle it today as well." She nodded quickly and busied herself with the coffee maker, the new power dynamic palpable in the room. Over the next few days, a strange peace settled over the household. Amanda suddenly found reasons to compliment my cooking, ask about my day, and offer assistance with my housing search. The house rules mysteriously disappeared, and my belongings remained undisturbed in their places. David requested a private conversation with me the following weekend, asking if we could take a walk together in the neighborhood. As we strolled past the elegant homes of Lake Oswego, he finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Mom, I want to apologize for how things have been these past months. I haven't been the son you and Dad raised me to be." "No," I agreed quietly. "You haven't." He winced at my directness, but continued. "Amanda and I have been under a lot of pressure. Her job has been demanding, and mine too. We were just starting to build our life together when Dad got sick, and then you needed a place to stay. And I became an inconvenience to your perfect life I finished for him. A reminder of obligations and mortality that didn't fit with your plans." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "Isn't it, David, I spent 43 years building a life with your father. Every decision we made, including helping you buy that house, was out of love for you. We never saw you as a burden, even when caring for you meant sacrificing our own comforts." He walked silently for several minutes before speaking again. "What happens now? With the house, I mean." "That depends on several factors," I said carefully, "including whether my son is still somewhere inside the man walking beside me." "What does that mean?" "It means I need to see evidence that the values your father and I tried to instill in you still exist. Compassion, integrity, respect for family. Those aren't just words, David. They're actions, especially when they're inconvenient." He attempted to negotiate, suggesting we modify the deed to reflect his years of mortgage payments and financial contribution. I neither agreed nor disagreed, telling him I would consult with an attorney to understand all options. This was not about revenge, but about finding a resolution that honored both justice and family bonds. Amanda's behavior shifted dramatically in the following weeks. The cold dismissal transformed into performative warmth and helpfulness. She invited me to join them for dinner with friends, asked my opinion on home decorating decisions, and even suggested weekend outings together. "I've been thinking about our garden plans," she said one evening. "Your native plant ideas were really brilliant. We should revisit those." The sudden change might have been convincing had I not overheard another late-night argument between them. I hadn't intended to listen, but their raised voices carried down the hallway to my room. "You need to fix this," Amanda hissed. "I am not losing this house because you couldn't stand up to your mother." "What exactly do you expect me to do?" "She's consulted a lawyer. The deed is legally binding." "Then convince her to sign it over. Remind her you're her son. Use the guilt card about your father wanting you to have security. You don't understand my mother if you think that would work. And you didn't know my father at all if you think he'd support treating her this way. Oh, please, don't act all high and moral now. You were perfectly fine with pushing her out last week when you thought this was our house." There was a pause before David replied quietly, "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I've forgotten what actually matters. What matters is that we're about to lose a property worth over $700,000, a property in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Portland. Do you have any idea what that does to our net worth, to our future plans? The conversation revealed more than Amanda likely intended about her motivations and values. The house wasn't primarily a home to her, but an asset, a status symbol, and a component of her financial planning. And perhaps that materialism had influenced David more than I had realized. The next morning I called Michael Greenberg, my family lawyer, who had also handled Jack's estate. I explained the situation and asked for his professional advice. "You're in a strong legal position, Alicia," he confirmed after reviewing the documents. "But I know you're not looking to punish your son. Let's discuss options that protect your interests while allowing for family healing if that's still possible." I also had a long conversation with Barbara about the concept of tough love and whether my actions were driven by hurt rather than care. "Ask yourself what Jack would want," she advised. "Not in terms of the property, but in terms of the lesson David needs to learn." That evening I called David's godmother, Ruth, who had known him since birth and had been Jack's colleague for 30 years. Her perspective was invaluable. "Jack always worried that David had things too easy," Ruth recalled. "He mentioned once that he feared David might value things over people because he never had to truly struggle for either." With these conversations guiding me, I spent several days in deep reflection. I reviewed the journal I had kept during my months in David's home. I reread the letters I had written to Jack. Most importantly, I found a file Jack had maintained with notes about our son, including his hopes and concerns for David's character and future. One note particularly stood out: "Ensure D understands that wealth lies in relationships, not possessions. If necessary, teach this lesson even when it's painful for all involved." As clarity emerged, I felt a strength and purpose I hadn't experienced since Jack's death. The path forward would require courage and wisdom, but I was increasingly certain of what needed to be done for both my sake and ultimately for my son's. 1 week after consulting with Michael Greenberg, I asked David and Amanda to join me for a family meeting in their living room. I arrived prepared with documents and a clear vision of how to proceed. "Thank you both for making time for this conversation," I began formally. "Before I share my decision about the house, I want to express something important." David nodded tensely, while Amanda perched on the edge of the sofa, her expression carefully neutral. "David, when your father was dying, he worried about 2 things: my financial security and your character. He feared that our efforts to give you advantages in life might have inadvertently prevented you from developing the compassion and perspective that come from overcoming challenges." David looked down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. "When you called me a burden, when you treated me as an inconvenience, rather than your mother who changed your diapers, nursed you through chicken pox, and sat through countless baseball games in the rain, you confirmed his worst fears." "Mom," I said I was sorry about that. David interrupted. "An apology without changed behavior is just manipulation, David. Something your father would have told you." I opened the folder containing the property documents and my lawyer's recommendations. "I've consulted with Michael Greenberg about our options regarding this house. Legally, as the primary deed holder, I could sell it and claim the majority of proceeds. I could also evict the current occupants with proper notice." Amanda's face drained of color, while David sat completely still. "But that's not why Jack and I put my name on this deed. We never intended to hold it over you or use it as leverage. It was meant to be a gift, a foundation for your adult life." I took a deep breath before continuing. "Here's what I've decided. First, I will be staying in this house. It is legally mine, and I need a place to live that I can afford on my pension. Amanda started to speak, but David silenced her with a look. "You both have three options," I continued. "Option 1. You can continue living here with me, but with new boundaries and mutual respect. We would formalize a cooperative living arrangement with clear expectations for all parties." I outlined what this would entail: defined private spaces, shared responsibilities, scheduled family dinners, and quarterly reviews of how the arrangement was working. Option 2. You can buy my share of the house at current market value. Michael has calculated this at approximately $420,000, considering my initial investment property, appreciation, and your mortgage payments over the years. The figure clearly shocked them, though it was actually quite fair given Portland's real estate inflation over the past decade. Option 3. You can move out, and I will find tenants for the rooms you currently occupy to help cover the mortgage and provide me with additional income. I closed the folder and looked directly at both of them. Whatever option you choose, I want to be clear about my expectations for how I will be treated. I am not a burden. I am not excess weight. I am a woman who has lived 67 years, raised a son, supported a husband, taught hundreds of children, and contributed to my community. I deserve respect, consideration, and kindness, especially from my own family. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, David spoke. "Can we have some time to discuss this?" "Of course." "Please let me know your decision by the end of the week." The following days were tense, but peaceful. I continued my routine at the community center, had lunch with Barbara, and began clearing out my storage unit, recognizing that regardless of David and Amanda's decision, I now had a permanent home. On Friday evening, David asked to speak with me alone. His expression was serious, but clearer somehow, as if a fog had lifted. "Amanda is moving out," he said simply. "She can't accept the new arrangement, and we don't have the funds to buy your share." "I see," I replied, surprised, but not entirely shocked. "And you?" "I'd like to stay, Mom. Not just because I need a place to live, but because I think Dad was right. I have some important lessons to learn about what really matters in life." We talked for hours that night, more openly than we had in years. David acknowledged how he had allowed Amanda's materialistic values to influence him, gradually pulling him away from the principles Jack and I had tried to instill. She kept talking about appearances, about impressing the right people, about building our brand as a couple, he confessed. Somewhere along the way, I forgot who I really am and where I came from. Amanda moved out the following weekend, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind the designer furniture she had selected so carefully. Within a month, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and specifically mentioning the financial deception regarding property ownership in her filing. The transition wasn't easy. David grieved the end of his marriage while simultaneously confronting uncomfortable truths about himself. I suggested we both attend counseling individually and together to process not just the recent events, but also our shared grief over losing Jack. "Your father would want us to heal together," I told him. "He always believed family could overcome anything with honest communication and genuine effort." Over the next several months, David and I established a new relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation. He took over home maintenance and yard work without being asked. I prepared meals several nights a week, but respected his privacy and independence. We both contributed financially, according to our means. Most importantly, we talked about Jack, regularly keeping his memory and values alive in our daily lives. David hung the family photos in the living room again and asked me to tell him stories about his father that he might have forgotten or never known. 6 months after what David came to call the reckoning, he met Sophia, a kindergarten teacher at my old school. Unlike Amanda, she valued family connections and treated me with genuine warmth from their first introduction. "Your mom is amazing," I overheard her telling David after dinner one evening. "I hope I have her energy and wisdom when I'm her age." With David's help, I converted the basement into a comfortable private apartment with its own entrance, giving both of us the perfect balance of togetherness and independence. When he tentatively brought up the future of the house, I was ready with an answer. "Your father and I always intended this house to be yours eventually," I told him. "When the time is right, we'll transfer ownership properly. But the true ownership of a home isn't about whose name is on a deed. It's about who fills it with love, respect, and care." The journey from being called a burden to rebuilding a loving family wasn't one I ever expected to take at 67. Yet in many ways, the painful experience brought valuable gifts, a new appreciation for my own strength, clarity about my worth, independent of my roles as wife and mother, and ultimately, a more authentic relationship with my son. Jack would be proud of us both now, I think. Proud of me for standing up for myself when it would have been easier to retreat. Proud of David for finding his way back to the values that truly matter. And perhaps most of all proud that his family remains connected by something stronger than legal documents or financial arrangements, love that perseveres even through betrayal and hurt. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? Do you think I made the right choice in how I handled the situation with my son and daughter-in-law? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more of my experiences. And share this with someone who might need a reminder that our worth doesn't diminish with age. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most important boundaries are the ones we set with those we love most.